Hello, it's been quite a while. I decided to take a bit of a hiatus, and it ended up lasting a lot longer than I intended. But I am back now, and I thought that I would share a little painting process with you. Today I wanted to test out these new watercolors that I got in Japan. I traveled there recently for the first time, and one of the things I knew I needed to do while I was there was pick up some art supplies. These are the Kusakabe charcoal color series. They're really interesting paints. They're not like normal watercolor at all. According to the box and what I can find online, these paints are made from upcycled pigments from a artistic charcoal producer called Iken. They definitely work very differently from other watercolors I've used. They granulate quite a bit, and they're a lot less translucent. They're almost a little like gouache, but they're very unique and beautiful, and honestly not that difficult to work with. The other thing I find really unique is the color palette. They're all very earthy and very gray tone, and these colors remind me a lot of stone, which is actually what inspired the piece that I'm making. I kind of wanted to theme it off the colors and what they reminded me of. So to talk about the piece itself, I wanted to go for a different kind of concept than I've gone for in the past. I've honestly really been trying to stretch myself a bit more and incorporate a little bit more lore or story into my pieces, since that's something that I really appreciate in others' artwork. And I also want to explain a little bit why there are pieces of tape and what appear to be streams of light. Basically, the concept is that this figure, this woman, is either under some kind of curse or is maybe some kind of stone elf that only animates and comes to life in the moonlight. And so I wanted to depict the statue half asleep, fully in stone, and half like awakening. And I thought it would be a really fun way to use all the different colors and also express a little bit of story. If I'd had a little more time, I think I would have added other elements or figures, but I wanted to focus mostly on the main statue and the light streaming through, and I wanted the environment to basically be forest-like, just foliage. I didn't want it to be the main focus, and I really wanted to use the texture of the paint to create the details of the background, like letting the granulation suggest the leaves and foliage that's there. I also want to admit that this is not my first attempt at this painting. I actually filmed an entire separate process of my first attempt. And my first try really wasn't too bad, but it was definitely full of learning, both with how I utilized the tape and also kind of how I went about it. It was kind of like a rough draft in a way. I was able to explore and make a few mistakes, and I felt like I was able to approach my second attempt with a lot more knowledge. I find that this happens quite frequently when I make larger planned out pieces. It almost always takes me multiple tries. I used to kind of beat myself up about it, and while I do think sometimes I can stumble into being a little too perfectionist, I think it's also not a bad thing to paint the same thing multiple times and to learn from it. Now, this isn't to say I didn't make any mistakes in my process here. I was still quite heavy-handed with the water, and occasionally I would put down too much pigment, which would lead to a little streakiness. Now, not all of it is shown on camera, but I did quite a bit of blotting with paper towels. I would spray the painting with water and kind of dab some of the pigment up. This creates a little bit of the texture that you see, and it was also kind of how I fixed some of my mistakes. Now, luckily for me, the paints are incredibly easy to lift. Not all the way, they definitely stain a tiny bit, but they were very forgiving to work with, which I definitely appreciate. Some other things to note are that I tried to do most of the darker areas first before doing the lighter areas, because I really wanted there to be a contrast. And honestly, it was a little bit more difficult than I thought to achieve. I also wanted to be able to convey that the body was stone, but that the clothing on the statue was real. So on both sides, it's fabric and not stone. But still, one side of the body is stone and the other side is not. And, this painting might not fully follow logic. For example, I know light probably does not fall the way that it does here, but I thought that it made for interesting composition. And we're doing fun fantasy stuff. We're not trying to be realistic here. And if I could go back, I also wouldn't have painted in the light sections, like the few washes that I did, I wouldn't have done while the tape was there, because it did leave these lines. Now, I do think they added some fun dimension, and by the time I finished the piece, they're basically gone, but I probably should have waited to paint anything in those areas until the tape was off. But the tape did help leave some more crisp, straight lines. I thought about drawing them in with a ruler and trying to paint around them, but having that thin washi tape really made my life a whole lot easier. I think that this would have been a lot more difficult without it. Now, a little bit of paint did bleed through. I probably could have used a stronger tape, but I was using what I had. It was still pretty easy to fix. Now, when I started painting the flesh tones, I did run into a couple issues. I'm used to having more reds at my disposal, but really there is only like a very dusty pink and a violet color and a kind of greenish yellow. And the yellow and pink are quite opaque, and if you don't mix properly or dilute it enough, it can look quite muddy. So I definitely struggled a little bit more with the skin tone, but I managed to make it work. It's just not what I'm used to. And to add to that just a little bit, I did really like the color choices, but they did make a few things a little bit difficult. I had to get a little bit creative in my mixing to be able to achieve browns and more flesh tone colors, because this is a very gray heavy palette. But honestly, that was a fun challenge to work around, and the colors all go so beautifully together that it really didn't end up being too big of a problem. But it does mean it is a little less versatile for some of the work I tend to do. Now, outside of this piece where I'm exclusively using this palette, this won't really be a problem since I have many other colors at my disposal and other brands of paint. But for this piece, I really wanted to focus on what I had here, along with a slight mixed media approach, because I just can't seem to avoid adding colored pencil to my pieces. But for the painting itself and for the paints, I exclusively used these watercolors. Another challenge that I faced was adding details. I think I've just gotten a little too used to detail work digitally because you can zoom in real far. And when you are painting traditionally, that's not an option. So doing the details on the face was a bit tricky, and also filming it, because when I am doing detail work, when I'm doing line work, my face is like 2 inches away from the paper. And if I'm filming, it makes it really difficult to see. So there are definitely a few parts that are cut out. And filming artwork in general, while I do enjoy the process, is not always the most immersive painting experience. It definitely adds an extra element to keep track of. But regardless, I still really enjoy doing it. It just takes a little adjusting when it's been a while. Because not only am I trying to problem solve my way through a painting, but I'm also trying to make sure that the camera is running smoothly, that things are staying in focus. I'm trying to make sure I'm not blocking or bumping the camera, and I'm also trying to make sure that the exposure is well done. And I use a combination of natural light and some extra strong lights on my desk, and so sometimes the lighting will change as I am painting. But I also know that it doesn't need to be perfect. And honestly, sharing my process is one of my favorite things to do. I really miss the days where we got to see artists complete a full painting, and obviously that still exists. But it's something that I don't see as much as I used to. I really like seeing how people work, and I find it really calming and sometimes a good way to learn new techniques as well. I think that social media's focus on short form content definitely takes a little bit of that away, because you're looking for just a few moments to focus on rather than the whole process. I have actually considered whether or not I need to be making more short form content, but honestly, I just don't enjoy it, and I am not really wanting to worry about algorithms anymore. I want to focus on art and community with other artists and growing my skill and focusing on the things that I truly enjoy about it and not the more superficial things. In fact, part of the reason I even took a social media break was to kind of recalibrate that part of my brain, so I wasn't so fixated on the less important things. And also not comparing myself so much to others as well. And a little aside, I just checked and it's been over a year since I posted on my art Instagram. I definitely want to get back to it, but I'm not gonna lie, Instagram's got me pretty frustrated right now. The way that Meta has handled AI and other stuff, it has definitely discouraged me. And I've been enjoying YouTube a lot more, but I do think it is something that I will get back to eventually. But I do think I'll be taking a more laid back approach and trying to share different parts of my process, and also just connecting with other artists. The other reason I avoided Instagram is because I am an avid doom scroller, and I just can't have Instagram on my devices if I want to avoid that. So part of the reason was also me trying to have a slightly better relationship with technology, but I also really do miss that community amongst other artists. To finish up my rambling, I'd love to invite you to share some artists that you love, whether that is someone in your life, an art account, or even yourself. Doesn't matter what medium I'd just love to discover some new artists and maybe find more community. At this point, we are wrapping up. I am just finishing some little details on the painting, adding some dimension with some colored pencil, and a little bit of white paint for highlights. And in just a moment, I will show you the final piece. And here is the finished painting. I haven't felt this proud about a piece in a really long time. I feel like it taught me something, and I really can't wait to bring that knowledge into something else in the future. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye.